So we went drifting this past weekend, and the clutch on this thing, so like when you push the clutch in, the arm moves but it doesn't come back. So I got to looking through the little kind of inspection covers and looking around, and where the arm is, I can kind of see in there, it almost looks like the throwout bearing either possibly isn't connected to the arm, or the springs come loose or broke or something, but the pivot arm and the throwout bearing aren't moving simultaneously. So there's definitely an issue there, so I'm gonna have to pull the transmission back out. I didn't change the throwout bearing and all that when I had the piece break, and I just want to put it back together as quick as possible, get it back in the car and go drifting, and that's probably what's come back to bite me in the butt. So we're gonna have to take transmission out of the 240 again, which it's doable. It's no major feat. It was pretty easy. I'm gonna try not to lose all my fluid this time because it's all new stuff. If I do, I do. It's no big deal. I prefer not to though. But again, if we do, we do. But I'll pull it off. We'll inspect the things that I replaced and try to figure out what the problem is with the front piece. There may be something I did, I don't know. Who's to say that I've never done any of this part of the transmission job. I'll accept responsibility on anything. If I mess something up, it may be, it may not, who's to say, but it's possible, anything's possible. But we're gonna start letting everything go. I probably won't get it out tonight, but I'm going to at least get a start on it tonight so I don't have as much to do on it tomorrow. I'd like to at least tomorrow figure out what it is, if I can get it back in. If it's something simple, I'd like to get it back in the car by tomorrow, by the time I'm done. If not, it is what it is, but if I can, I'd like to get it, back together. So, all right, we're gonna get started on it. We're gonna go ahead and start pulling the rear end loose, the drive shaft, start pulling it out. So, all right, here we go. All right, so first things first, I'm gonna go ahead and start pulling the, wait, I'm tightening, the rear drive shaft. Wait a minute, what am I doing here? Yeah, I'm going the right way. There we go. The rear drive shaft bolts, start pulling those out. There's 4 of these things. The back side of the bolt on this side, it kind of locks in, so when you're taking them out, you don't necessarily have to have a wrench to hold back. Sometimes you have to have 2 wrenches. Putting them in, it tends to want to push that way, so sometimes you end up having to at least hold it pushed in or something. But it has, it kind of locks in on these. There's 4 of them. Nothing major going on here. Just basic. Four nuts and bolts. So you have to drop the tail end of the drive shaft to pull it. The other end just slides out. It's a slip yoke, I guess it's called. And I dropped it. So there's 2. When we have to rotate this thing, if I got the brake on, I may have to let the car back down to rotate it. And on these, I always put the nut back on it because there's not a lot in this deal that the bolts have a nut on them, so that makes it easier for me to determine which ones are the whatchamacallums, the rear drive shaft bolts. And sometimes you gotta use your handy dandy mallet. 3-pounder. I think that's what it is, 3. Something like that. I finally decided to break down and go get one. That thing's handy. Yeah. Sometimes you can't figure out where to get your hands up in here. But these are pretty straightforward. This top one will be hard to get to, so I'll have to figure out if it's in gear. The way it fell, it brakes on too. So I have to let it down to get that thing. So, and make sure the air is on for the compressor to let it down. And here we go, let's get that done. Okay, all right, so I guess technically this car is a 240. I guess everybody refers to it as a S14. You'll hear me refer to it a lot as a 240 because for one particular reason. I'm old school, and you know, when I got into this stuff, a 240 was that very thing. It was a 240. You didn't hear anybody, like I didn't hear that reference to an S chassis. I would say mid 2000s or so, which I've seen them, and I'd seen drift videos, and I just never heard reference of S chassis. Well, I guess maybe it was early 2000s. I guess I may have heard it then, but you know, all the kids nowadays, everybody, it's S14. You know, I can refer to it as that. That doesn't make it a S14 from Japan. You know what I mean? I can call it whatever I want, but that doesn't make it so. I guess to me, it's like calling the Civics EKs, EGs, and all that. It's a 92 to 95 or a 96 to 2000. It'll always be that to me. I'll make reference to EK, EG, but it's just because, you know, that's what everybody refers to those things as now. And so that makes it, you know, that simplifies it, I guess, to where, you know, people are, that's the way they refer to them now. So I guess that's the thing to call them. So I just go with it. So if you hear me refer to a EG, EK Civic, or anything of that nature by the year, 92, 95, 96, 98, 99, 2000, that's the way we did it back then, you know what I mean? We didn't know EK, EG, S chassis. That didn't mean anything to us back then. You know, we didn't call out letters, we called out what years, you know, 92, 95, coupe, hatch, SI, EX. That's how we knew. We didn't know EK, EG. We just didn't work that way back then. So just a little fact, I guess, kind of thing. So if you hear that, hear me reference it to that, you know, it's not that I don't know what I'm talking about. It's just that in those days, that's the way they were referred to, you know. All this EG, EK stuff came after the fact of it being in existence for 20 years. So I guess it's just the progression of, you know, these cars. And maybe in Japan they've been called S chassis, EKs, EGs the whole time, I guess. So that's technically what they would be. But you know, it is what it is. May have already damaged our, I think we're okay. these cups tend to push out of these things. We need to bleed the clutch too as well. So either way, it's possible may have already damaged this thing. I think it's okay though. So what they do is there's a cup in here, and so it pushes this cup completely out when it travels too far, and that damages inside there. I had that issue on the 350Z quite a bit actually. Maybe it's G35. I think yeah, it was all the G35. I was starting to say I think it might have been on the 350Z too, but I don't believe it was. And on these bolts, if I can, I try to just leave them where they live. Keeps it simple. That way you can maintain, you know, correct bolts and correct bolt holes, and you don't have to hunt them. Everything kind of runs together after a pile of cars, you know. So, all right, so we got the handy dandy transmission jack out. So we'll get it up here and start taking some tension off of this jewel. So all we've done so far is take the 4 bolts out of the tail of the drive shaft. It comes down, and then it literally pulls, just slides straight out of here. There's no bolts on this side. And then I pulled 2 bolts out of the side of the slave cylinder, and now we're getting a jack here just to hold tension, so that way we can let our excuse me, that way we can let our rear mount down. And so now we move on to that. I think there's a oddball size bolt in these things here. So yeah, all right. One of these bolts is not like the others. Got those jewels out. So now we got to get our little tub, because we're going to lose some fluid whether I want to or not, because we have to let it down so far to be able to get the top bell housing bolts. That's the main reason. Okay, so I got my little green tub to catch my oil and stuff in, and that way when we let the tail of this thing down a little bit, it should catch anything. Well, this is the one we have to, that's on me. Alright, now on this one, the exhaust holds quite a bit. Forgot about that. So, sometimes they have a flex in them. That's on me. I forgot to take the exhaust bolts out right here. And I may have already filmed that. I don't remember how much I filmed of it, but we're gonna show what we can. That way, if I get to that and I don't have enough, or the footage isn't that great, you'll have 2 options here to see this again. Let's see. Let's see. What will be our best? Yeah, I think I'm gonna have to ratchet wrench him. Let's see what we got. There we go. Now I got to get something to hold behind it. Some of these, I think, yeah, that one's good. Some of these are oddball bolts. They got different size heads and different size bolts entirely. So I think we're good here. These are 17s. I don't know if that's a standard size, because this is aftermarket exhaust. It looks to be 2.5, 3 inch, maybe 2.5. Might be 3. Maybe the tail's 3 and that's 2.5, because I don't think it's all 3. And on these, again, keep your exhaust bolts separated, because they end up going through a different experience in life than your standard bolts. On this side, I'll just clamp it with some vice grips. All I gotta do is hold it from turning. There we go. And here we go. It says it's a 14, but the 15 wouldn't fit it. Huh. You'll see now that this will drop way down. The transmission will come on down after we get this piece going. So let's let her down a little bit. Probably see some stuff run out the back of it there. Be a little transmission fluid. Alright, so my Boss-Stitch battery is almost dead. And my Milwaukee, both batteries are bad, I think. So now it's back to my handy dandy Hitachi. The new stuff I bought is actually in the rollback. We keep it in there. So we're just getting started on some of the bolts here. I'm gonna have to unwrench the, or not unwrench, but unplug the a few plugs here on top. Then we're gonna have to take the, let's see what else we got. Here it comes. The wiring harness. This will be on the rear is the speed sensor. Right here somewhere. Yep, right there. So this is a speed sensor on the very back. That's where I pulled the last time to get the oil to drain. I guess the bottom of this thing, somebody has over tightened it at one time. I can't get it to come loose. So I had to find somewhere for it to drain from, so I used where the speed sensor is. Alright, so that's the wiring, I think. Let's see. One more plug here. Your neutral safety switch and everything is down on these plugs here. So and I zip tied this one so it wouldn't come apart because the clips broke on it. Not sure which one this is on the here, but one of them is the neutral safety switch, and I don't think it's, one of them was broke, so. Alright, so that gives us all our sensors, I think. Alright, and we got our starter will be on this side as well. Your bell housing bolts will be 14s on this side here, and the bottom one was too. I'm not sure once I get on top. I know your starter bolts are 17s. Alright, so we're going to use this long extension to go across the top and get our starter bolts right across through here. Let me get this jewel out of here. It's stuck. Come on now. There we go. There's one starter bolt. And if you'll notice, the bell housing bolts are yay long and the starter bolts are that much longer. And there's a 14 is the bell housing and 17 on the starter. It gets kind of sketchy under there. That long extension, everything wants to fall on your head. All right, so that's the two starters. Got a bell housing on each side. So I think it's about time to put a strap from our jack here. So we hunt the straps and we'll get her strapped in there. All right, so I got my two straps on. I do these for safety. One, because I'm by myself, and for two, I'm by myself. Yeah, so, you know, this is just smart, you know, to not have the stinking thing fall on you and hurt you and all that stuff. So, right now, what we're dealing with is our shifter's got to be turned loose up top. And that's going to consist of 12 millimeters bolts. But I think there's one that's a little bigger. I guess whoever had this before kind of stripped one out. And so I think I ended up putting a bigger one in it, just to maybe it's 12 or 13. Yeah, that is the 13. Half inch will work. It's the same, pretty close to the same anyway. But I had to put a bigger bolt in it because somebody had stripped this thing out. That definitely held good, the new bolt I put in, so it worked out good. That thing's good and tight. The 12s, you know, you gotta think this is just a aluminum shifter. Yeah, you want it to hold good, but at the same time, these are only 12 millimeter bolts. It's probably, the actual stud piece is probably only 10 millimeter with fine thread. The head's, you know, 12, but that don't mean the bolt itself is that. So you gotta watch over tightening some of this stuff. Some people just get completely silly, but I did have to go, it's almost like a standard bolt. I had to change to that on that one. And there's one on the mount that's oddball. Somebody actually had already changed that before I got the car. So there's two on the back, two kind of in the middle, and two on the front side, and they're a little harder to get to on the very, very front, but they're not impossible. So you can get ourselves a little room there. Most forward ones are the forward ones, the ones in the front, they're harder to get. But they're not as rough as some of the stuff I've done. I gotta admit, the downpipes on the BMW was probably two of the hardest things I've ever changed. Alright, so figured out what the holdup was. The exhaust on this side was sitting on the edge of the lift, so and there goes all the fluid, the new stiff. That stuff's expensive. Alright, so here's our ISR shifter. Get them loaded up here. We'll go across the top. We'll hunt our bolts. There's one. And that's out. Alright, so we took our other bell housing bolt out of the top on this side. And I gotta get it, it's loose. There it goes. Alright. So, we got one more on this side that I missed, but I think that's the last one. Pretty sure it is. Before you go to acting crazy and pulling and yanking and stuff, make sure you got all your bolts. Oh yeah. I seen it let go right there. So that one will be the last one. Pretty confident in it this time. Yeah, that's it. Yep. Says need to come down. There we go. Come on. Way about got her. It's pretty close. What it is on this where the bell housing is, you don't have much of a window to back it up before you're into the body of the car. So you're hitting the bell housing with, Alright, so I'm not 100% sure what the problem was, but I had a pivot ball that I'd ordered for the G35 chasing my tail on that whole ordeal. And it didn't look as worn, and it had a little bit thicker washer on it. And I reset where the throwout bearing's hooked on. Maybe it come loose when we set it. No, it was pretty solid when I drove it. It didn't have any issues. Maybe when my sun clutch kicked a little bit, it might have come loose. I don't know, but it didn't feel like it was loose. Everything feels as it should. I don't know, but there was also a thin spacer here, and so what that'll do is keep the transmission just a hair back. It wasn't very thick, so maybe that'll move us forward a little bit. And then that little bit of washer, that may make up the difference. And we'll give it a shot. We'll see what the difference is on it. It may be better, may be worse. Who's to say? So we'll figure it out from here and give it a shot. I don't know that I did anything any different. I just checked everything, cleaned it a little more. You can tell the clutch has been smoked a little, so we'll have to break that clutch in a little better. Alright, so I'm going to tilt to match the angle of the motor, because it is tilted quite a bit. Alright, so when you get it to where you can throw a bolt in it, you may want to do that, but don't get crazy, because there may be something you've not thought of or seen. You may be a little out of kilter. You may have something that's not lined up exactly where it should be. Once you get a bolt in one side though, that at least gives you a starting point so the other side doesn't jump around, so you can kindly get a little bit of an idea where everything should be. Alright, just put a little snug on it. That way we can fish for another bolt over here on the other side. And try to get everything lined up just right. We're just putting a little tight on something here. Oh, it actually pulled all the way up, so yeah, that's it right there. Oh yeah. So, I guess now put it back together because it pulled right up. So, we'll slap some bolts in it. Here we go. Alright, so like anything, you don't want to put all your bolts in it or tighten one bolt at a time. You want to get all your bolts started. And I always go after the starter because that's something it takes you a minute to line it up usually. So I try to get it started as quick as I can. And try to throw all the bolts on the ground if you can. One starter bolt is started. So I'm going on past the top starter bolt and go ahead and get the other bell housing, the top bell housing bolt kindly lined up there. And thread it right in. So, here's the top starter. It's a little bit of a pain to get this long bolt turned just right. And this is actually not a bad transmission job. It doesn't have all the factory stuff on it. There's things that, you know, people leave off to make it easier to go back and do it. But there couldn't have been a lot taken off, you know. There's maybe a few plugs that don't have the correct bracket or the clip or something on this thing, but I guess the overall job here, the exhaust will be different. You'll have factory things on your exhaust that won't be here on the transmission, or, you know, factory bolts and stuff that they've replaced and all that. But for the most part, it's pretty much the same. The factory shifter will be a little different. It'll be a little more involved, but definitely gonna have to have some more transmission oil, because we lost a lot. Lost a lot on this jewel. So, with the starter bolts being started, I can go ahead and hit all of my bell housing bolts and get them good and tight. Oh, this is the dead battery one, no wonder. I was like, what? I didn't know what was going on. So, the old trusty Hitachi. There we go. There we go. There we go. There we go. If you don't have this tool, this thing's worth its weight in gold. If you're doing transmission jobs, or even if you work on your own, stuff, this thing is worth its weight in gold. All right, you ain't gonna believe this, but that right there is all of the bolts on the bell housing. Give them snug every now and then if you can get to it. That impact does pretty good, but sometimes you just go give them a check. And if you can get to it. Come on. Maybe. There we go. Oh, yeah. So, all right, if you can get to it. So now, a couple things have to happen. We might as well go ahead and put our slave cylinder back on while we're right here. It's a pretty simple job. It's 2 bolts on the slave. If they're on this passenger side on this car, they're set up different. So the slave itself goes right there. I believe this will be a whole different animal as far as the travel of the clutch. I don't know, I hope. Anyway, we'll keep our fingers crossed that it did something.
I'm feeling high.